Chosen one, close your eyes for just a moment before you receive this word. Not because what is about to be said requires darkness to be understood, but because the noise of your circumstances has been so loud for so long that your spirit needs a moment of deliberate stillness to fully receive what heaven has been trying to break through and tell you. The reports of your situation that have been reaching your ears through the voices of doubt and discouragement, and the visible evidence of unchanged circumstances have formed a narrative about your life that is louder than the truth. And today the truth is speaking louder. Open your eyes and receive this. There is a door in your life that has been the subject of a battle you have not always been able to see clearly from where you have been standing. Not just a circumstantial blockage or a natural delay that time and effort would eventually resolve through ordinary means. A specifically targeted door over which a specific spiritual battle has been fought through every season you have been waiting before it. A door that the enemy identified early as the entrance to the dimension of your destiny that would make you most dangerous to his agenda and most impactful in the lives of the people connected to your purpose. A door he therefore invested extraordinary resources into keeping sealed and into convincing every observer, including you, that its sealed condition was not temporary but permanent. He was wrong about the door, he was wrong about you, and he is about to be proven wrong in a way that will produce a testimony from your life that reaches further than anything your previous seasons of visible blessing ever generated. The door is opening, quietly, steadily, irreversibly. Right now, the battle over this specific door, chosen one. Not every closed door in a person's life receives the same level of enemy attention and opposition. The enemy is strategic. He does not distribute his resources equally across every situation in every chosen life. He studies, he evaluates. He identifies the specific doors that lead to the specific dimensions of destiny that will produce the greatest kingdom impact, and he concentrates his most sustained and sophisticated opposition around those particular doors. The door that is opening over your life right now received that concentrated opposition. The enemy looked at what was behind it. He saw the specific calling, the specific provision, the specific relationships, the specific platform, the specific influence that was waiting on the other side. And he understood that if this door opened and you walked through it, operating in the fullness of what God placed on the other side, the consequences for his agenda in your sphere of influence would be significant and lasting. So he went to work. Not with the dramatic and obvious opposition that would have been easily identified and resisted, but with the subtle and sophisticated strategy that has always been his most effective weapon against chosen hearts. He went to work on the narrative. He began constructing the story of permanent closure around this door, using every piece of evidence available to him. Every season the door remained visibly unchanged, became a brick in the wall of his narrative. Every unanswered prayer became a paragraph in his argument. Every voice that agreed with the closure became a chapter in the case he was building for the conclusion he needed you to reach. That conclusion was this: the door is closed for a reason that is beyond reversal. Accept it, adjust to it. Build your life around its permanent closure and stop investing faith in a promise that was either never meant for you or has expired beyond the point of fulfillment. If he could get you to that conclusion, he could get you away from the threshold, and a chosen heart away from the threshold of the door at the moment of its opening is a chosen heart that misses the breakthrough it endured a long season of waiting to receive. But chosen one, you did not reach that conclusion, not fully, not permanently. Something in your spirit, something that no amount of evidence and no sustained narrative of permanent closure could completely extinguish, kept you returning to the threshold, kept you pressing your hand against the door, kept you speaking the promise even when your voice trembled and your confidence wavered, kept you here, at this moment, receiving this word, and that keeping is itself the evidence that the God who prepared what is behind this door has been keeping you for it all along. What Nehemiah teaches about closed doors, chosen one. The story of Nehemiah contains a truth about closed doors and determined opposition that speaks directly into what you are experiencing right now, and what God is doing in response to it. When Nehemiah received the burden to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, those walls had been broken and burned and lying in ruins for generations. The door of Jerusalem's protection, its dignity, its identity as the city of God, had been declared permanently closed by every natural assessment of the situation. The destruction was too complete. The time of its ruin was too extended. The opposition surrounding the project was too powerful and too organized. By every measurement available to human evaluation, the door of Jerusalem's restoration was not just closed, but permanently so. Yet Nehemiah went to work, and when he went to work, the enemy immediately deployed his most sophisticated strategy. Not direct physical opposition first, narrative opposition. Sanballat and Tobiah, the primary enemies of the restoration, began working immediately to construct a narrative of impossibility around what Nehemiah was doing. They mocked the quality of the work. They questioned the validity of the effort. They gathered allies and organized coordinated discouragement designed to convince the workers that what they were building would never stand and that the door they were working to reopen would fall back into permanent closure the moment they stepped back from it. Does that sound familiar, chosen one? Does the strategy of your enemies bear any resemblance to the strategy deployed against Nehemiah? The mockery that questions whether what you have been believing for is genuinely possible for someone in your specific situation. The organized discouragement that comes through multiple voices simultaneously, all pointing to the same conclusion of futility. The coordinated narrative of permanent closure that uses every available piece of evidence to argue that the door you are working toward was never going to open. What Nehemiah did in response to that strategy is what heaven is calling you to do right now. He kept building. He posted guards at the vulnerable points of the wall, and he kept building. He prayed, and he kept building. He received discouraging reports, and he kept building. He heard every argument for the impossibility of the restoration, and he kept building. And the wall that every enemy declared permanently ruined beyond the possibility of restoration was completed in 52 days. Not because the enemies ran out of arguments, but because Nehemiah refused to let their arguments determine his actions. The wall was completed. The door of Jerusalem was restored, and the enemies who had invested so comprehensively in the narrative of permanent closure were left standing before the evidence of their fundamental miscalculation. Your door is being restored. Chosen one, keep building. The specific deception of permanent closure there is something about the enemy's strategy of declaring permanent closure over a chosen door that deserves specific and careful examination. Because permanent closure is a categorically different claim than temporary closure, and it requires a categorically different response. When the enemy declares a door temporarily closed, he is saying, wait, and it might open eventually. A person can sustain faith through a temporarily closed door with relative ease because the promise of eventual opening is still alive in the declaration. Hope is present. Expectation is maintained. Faith has something to reach toward. But when the enemy declares permanent closure, he is attacking something far more fundamental. He is not just saying the door is not opening yet. He is saying the door is not going to open, ever. And if he can get that declaration accepted even partially in the spirit of the waiting heart, he has accomplished something far more damaging than simply delaying the breakthrough. He has attempted to remove the category of future opening from the person's expectation entirely. A heart that has accepted permanent closure does not pray with expectation. It prays with resignation. It does not stand at the threshold with attentiveness. It stands at a distance with protected detachment. It does not prepare for walking through the door. It prepares for a life organized around its absence. And each of these responses, though completely understandable given the sustained pressure of the enemy's narrative, moves the chosen heart further from the position of receiving the breakthrough that the door's opening will release. This is why heaven is speaking so specifically and so urgently about the permanent closure narrative today. Because the antidote to that specific deception requires a specific and targeted declaration, not just encouragement that things will eventually work out, but the precise and authoritative counter-declaration that the permanent closure your enemies proclaimed was never within their authority to establish, and that the opening your spirit has been sustaining faith toward is not a distant possibility but a present reality already underway. The permanent closure was a lie. The quiet opening is the truth, and truth received in the spirit of a chosen heart produces a repositioning at the threshold that changes everything about what happens next. The sound the door makes. When God opens its chosen one, there is something beautiful and important that heaven wants you to understand about the specific sound that a divinely opened door makes as it moves. Because this understanding will help you recognize the opening that is already underway even before it reaches the point of dramatic and obvious visibility. When a door has been closed for a long time, the hinges carry the accumulated rust and resistance of every season of its sealed condition. And when God begins moving that door, the first sounds of its movement are not the dramatic proclamation of sudden and instantaneous breakthrough. They are the quiet sounds of long-sealed mechanisms beginning to respond to a force greater than the resistance that held them in place. Small sounds, subtle sounds, the kind of sounds that require attentiveness to hear and that can easily be dismissed as insignificant by a spirit that has been conditioned by long waiting to distrust small movements. These quiet sounds of the opening include the slight shift in the atmosphere of your prayer life over this specific situation. A new quality of access. A sense that your words are traveling through less resistance than they previously encountered. A peace arriving in the middle of praying about this situation that does not match the unchanged appearance of the circumstances surrounding it. That is a sound of the door moving. These quiet sounds include the unexpected thought or idea or impression that arrives with a clarity and a precision that tells you it did not originate in your own ordinary thinking. A direction regarding the situation that you had not previously considered, but that immediately resonates with something deep in your spirit as aligned with the truth of the promise. That is a sound of the door moving. These quiet sounds include the unexpected person who appears in your path carrying a piece of information, an encouragement, a connection, or a resource that is specifically relevant to the situation connected to this door. Not a coincidence, a confirmation, a sound of the door moving. And these quiet sounds include the returning of a specific and settled confidence in the promise behind this door that arrives without a visible change in circumstances to justify it. A knowing in your spirit that is calmer and deeper and less dependent on evidence than the hope of previous seasons. That knowing is perhaps the loudest of the quiet sounds of the opening. It is your spirit hearing what is happening on the other side of the door before your natural senses have registered the movement. It is spiritual perception recognizing the reality of what is already underway in the dimension where God's most consequential work always begins. Listen for these sounds, chosen one. They are already present around your situation, and they are growing louder with every moment that the quiet opening continues its steady and irreversible advance. The garden tomb and the rolled stone, chosen one. There is no more powerful biblical illustration of a door declared permanently closed that God opened in a way that redefined everything than the sealed tomb of Jesus on the Saturday between crucifixion and resurrection. On that Saturday, every natural observer of the situation had reached the conclusion of permanent closure. The stone was sealed. Roman guards were posted. The official power of the most dominant empire on earth had been deployed to ensure the permanence of the closure. The disciples were scattered and hiding. Their behavior, the behavioral evidence of people who had internally accepted the permanent closure narrative. The enemies of the promise were satisfied and celebrating, their confidence in the sealed tomb so complete that they had deployed their own resources to reinforce it. By every measurement available to human evaluation, the door of resurrection was not just closed, but permanently, officially, militarily, politically, and spiritually sealed beyond any realistic possibility of reversal. Yet in the quiet of the early morning, while every enemy slept in the confidence of their secured closure, while every discouraged disciple hid in the grief of accepted permanent loss, while every natural observer remained unaware that the most significant event in human history was about to express itself in the visible realm, the stone moved, not because a human hand pushed it, not because natural circumstances aligned to produce its movement, not because the disciples organized a plan to roll it away. It moved because the God who holds authority over every sealed stone and every closed door and every sealed tomb and every declared permanent ending decided that the moment of opening had arrived. And when that decision was made, no guard and no seal and no official declaration of permanent closure and no amount of enemy confidence in the finality of what they had secured had any power whatsoever to prevent what God decided to open. The stone rolled, the tomb opened, the resurrection walked out. And every enemy who invested in the narrative of permanent closure was left standing before evidence of a reversal so complete and so authoritative that 2,000 years later, their arguments for permanence have been answered by a testimony that has reached every corner of the inhabited earth. Your door is not a tomb, chosen one, but the God who rolled the stone that Saturday morning is the same God who holds the key to your door. And if he can open a sealed tomb guarded by Roman soldiers, he can open a door that your enemies declared permanently closed. He is already doing it. And the testimony that will emerge from the opening of your door will carry the same undeniable quality as the testimony of an empty tomb, not explainable by natural causes, not accountable to human strategy, attributable only to the sovereign and faithful and completely unstoppable decision of the God who opens what no enemy can keep closed. Receive the opening and walk toward the threshold, chosen one. As this message reaches its conclusion, there is one thing being asked of you that is both simple and profound. one response that will position you perfectly for what the quietly opening door is about to release into your life. Define the opening as a present reality rather than a future possibility. Not will open, is opening. Not might happen, is happening. Not something to hope for, something to position yourself to walk through. The difference between those two postures is the difference between standing in the middle of the room, still oriented toward the life organized around the closed door, and turning back to face the threshold with the expectant posture of someone who has received the news that the door they have been waiting before is opening right now. Turn toward the threshold, chosen one. Speak the promise over the door again with fresh conviction. Pray over the situation with the alert engagement of someone who has received intelligence that the breakthrough is advancing rather than the resigned going through. The motions of someone who has prayed the same prayer so many times it has lost its sharpness. Begin making the interior preparations for what walking through this door will require. Open your hands, open your expectation. Open your spirit to the reality that the quiet opening your enemies never anticipated is advancing toward its full and glorious visible manifestation. The door is opening. Your enemies were wrong. The God who holds every key has decided that the time of this door's sealed condition is over, and what is coming through it will silence every voice that ever declared permanent closure over the promise that you refuse to release through every season of the waiting. Stand at the threshold, chosen one. The God of the rolled stone is rolling yours, and the resurrection on the other side of it has been worth every moment of the Saturday season that preceded this Sunday morning of your breakthrough. Tip, amen, if you receive this word today. Share it with someone whose door needs the encouragement of knowing that the God who opens sealed tombs opens sealed doors too. And nothing their enemies declared permanent can survive the decision of a God who says it is time.